Well, good afternoon. I'm Nancy Muir with Miles for Hips, and I'm here today with Angela Gannon. Angela lives with her husband, Jamie, and her 3.5-year-old daughter, Mia, outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Mia was diagnosed with DDH when she was 20 months old. Even though she displayed warning signs such as delayed walking and uneven thigh creases, her diagnosis, she went misdiagnosed or undiagnosed up until 20 months. Mia had an open reduction with a femoral and pelvic osteotomies when she was 2 years old with Dr. Navias at Boston Children's Hospital. She's now very active and loves running, jumping, and biking. And then Angela is just an amazing woman, is in the process of founding a nonprofit with a group of other women. The nonprofit's called the Pediatric Hip Dysplasia Action Network, and that's how she and I got to know each other. But basically, it's a nonprofit looking to advocate for earlier intervention for children with DDH. So, Angela, welcome. This is so
Thank you.
exciting. I know it took a little coordination to try to find times when kids weren't sleeping awake in the
Yeah.
office, out of the office work. So glad this worked. And I'm
Yeah,
excited
for
to have
having me.
you. Yeah, and this
Yeah.
is wonderful. And we're just getting ready to kick off Hip Dysplasia Awareness Month. So perfect time to be
Yeah.
having a little conversation. And so glad that you're willing to share your experience and your family's hip dysplasia experience.
Yeah.
But really, to start, I would love you just to tell us a little bit about your experience, just to give us a little background about you and your family and how you came to be interested in hip dysplasia or get familiar with hip dysplasia, I
Yeah.
guess I should say.
So Mia had a natural childbirth. She met all her gross motor skills as a baby. Really didn't have any issues until she was about a year and starting to pull to stand. And we noticed some kind of um, leg length discrepancies with her legs and with the way that she pulled herself to stand, and then she wasn't walking. And we kept going back to the doctor saying she has a walking delay, and we got her checked out in neurology. Nothing came up there. She started physical therapy to address the walking delay, but even the physical therapists were like, something's off. We don't know what, but she didn't want to take steps on her own for a long time. And then that's when we finally went to the orthopedist, and they confirmed that she had hip dysplasia with a total dislocation. We were totally blindsided. That never came up in any of the conversations we had with our doctors. And it just wasn't on our radar as new parents. You don't hear a lot about hip dysplasia. And then we found out she had to be getting surgery and be in a spica cast for 3 months. So that totally turned our world upside down. But when she did start walking right before the surgery, it was very labored and she had a limp. And, we wanted her to have a healthy life. And it was the best thing that happened for her. And she's doing really well now. But it's been a long road for the past 2 years dealing with all of it.
Yeah, I can imagine. And just to go through that period of time, I mean, first of all, like you said, she was born healthy, typically developing, no concerns.
Yeah.
So then to all of a sudden hit this like year mark or so when you start to notice concerns, and then to be doing your due diligence as a family, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
you saw a specialist, you talked to your pediatrician, you did physical therapy. I mean, this was not you guys just ignoring what you were seeing.
Right.
But even with all the signs, and was hip dysplasia ever mentioned as something, oh, we
Yeah.
should look into or get an x-ray? And no, even though there were
No.
some
Yeah.
signs in
Um,
retrospect at least.
we did have, so she was in early intervention for other issues, and we did a consult with um, an OT, and she was the one that suggested for us to get her checked out by the neurologist and orthopedist.
Okay.
Because she just thought there was some differences between her left and right side, and she didn't know what. But we had brought up like that she dragged her foot when she tried to pull the stand, and then she would go on her tiptoes on one side and not the other. So she suggested to go just to do your due diligence, get checked out. Um, and the problem was our pediatrician said, okay, let's start with neurology. We went there. Neurology said everything looked fine. She's on track to walk. It's just might take a while. Start physical therapy. And then when we brought up the orthopedist to our pediatrician, he was like, no, no, like we don't need to get that checked out yet. It never really came up at all. And then after our physical therapist started having concerns, and we still brought it up about the orthopedist, he still kind of pushed us away from there until we were finally like, we want to go to ortho. So, it was frustrating to like looking back that we kept pushing to kind of get help and we were kind of brushed off. But my story is very similar to a lot of families. And we hear even with older kids, their kids are walking with limps, 3, 4 years old, and the doctors kind of say, oh, they're fine, they'll grow out of it. When really you could determine DDH with a simple x-ray. So, part of the reason why I joined the advocacy group is, to promote better advocacy for earlier screenings and kind of investigate why the pushback on imaging when it's a very easy solution to a difficult puzzle that, it's a long journey for some people.
Mm-hmm. And and unfortunately, like you said, it's not that uncommon of a story that,
Right.
what you experienced, even though it feels very isolating in the moment until you connect with those people with the greater story, but also very similar to, my more experiences with hip dysplasia in the adolescent and adult world. And same thing, the statistics really say that even the adolescents and adults, a lot of times, I think the statistics are see an average of 3 providers over the course of 5 years before getting an accurate diagnosis. And,
Yeah.
um, that's in a mature system. So when you've got a baby who's in the process of it, very, very, probably very frustrating and sad as a family too, to
Yeah.
just say we're doing everything we can and still not getting the answers. And then when it comes, it seems almost kind of obvious.
Yeah.
Um, but
And not to say that, like, so, we don't completely blame one doctor or anything like that, because it is very easy to miss hip dysplasia. And she did have her regular hip checks when she was like leading up throughout her first year. And her hip very easily could have slipped out. We don't really know when she got dislocated. Um, and the only sign we really had was she did have an uneven thigh fold. When she was about 6, 7, 8 months, it started appearing. And we just thought it was cute, chubby baby thighs. And, um, I think we also are working with educating providers of like, oh, these are signs if you have uneven creases in the baby's thigh. And firstborn females are also at higher risk. So putting those kind of clues together could have maybe gotten us an earlier diagnosis, an earlier surgery. I don't think we would have been racing because it would have been too late because she really didn't have any other warning signs. But yeah, that was really a missed sign that we could have looked into.
Yeah, and you know what? I might turn our conversation a little bit just to some of the advocacy and education work that you are doing, just because, well, we're talking about it. But like you said, there were certain signs. We know that babies, female, firstborn. Was your daughter breech? I know that was another. That can be
So
another risk.
that was kind of the also surprising thing to share with others about DDH is that your child doesn't have to have any risk factors, because Mia didn't, besides being firstborn and female. We had no family history. She was not breech, no complications during labor or anything. So we had no reason to investigate it at the time.
And I think that's so interesting because and speaks to the education piece that there is a history and screening that is so important, but also there are the physical signs. And I've seen both missed. I've seen where just the simple screening questions aren't being asked. But in your situation, yeah, she checked the box on female firstborn, but that's so prevalent that
Right.
those, maybe aren't the ones that scream, let's check the hips more thoroughly, but certainly some of these physical examination things like you said, the uneven thigh creases, the uneven leg lengths, and then certainly as she started advancing those motor skills and having uneven motor skills,
Right.
really starts to scream for it. And then you kind of got sidetracked down another diagnostic route.
Yeah.
But so glad you eventually got there. But yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got involved in raising hip dysplasia awareness in your advocacy work?
Sure. So really for supports for families with children with hip dysplasia, there's not really a lot of resources out there. You get the diagnosis, you go through the surgery, and the doctors and the surgeons help you through all of that. But when you get home, you're kind of on your own with the
Yeah.
care and living spica life for 3 months with a child in a cast. And one surgeon that we spoke to suggested to look on Facebook, that there's a lot of Facebook support groups out there. So that's where we joined like several Facebook groups with thousands of members, and we have people ask questions kind of about anything and everything about taking care of a baby, about diagnosis, um, and it's a great supportive group. And while I was on there, I had seen people kind of post, a lot of people are angry and upset that this was missed, people wanting to do more. And that's where I saw somebody post about that they're starting an advocacy group. I believe it was Kelly. And I had messaged her that I was interested in spreading awareness because, I just wanted people to have it more on their radar. I have a lot of friends who have kids, and it wasn't on their radar. And clearly, it's an issue worldwide. So, yeah, we that's how I got started in the group. And then they had already been meeting before I joined, and we're really now taking it to the next level and working on forming it into a nonprofit. So, yeah, it's been exciting.
That's wonderful. And I think, so even just a couple of the things that you bring up are so interesting. And one is, first of all, just the power of patients and families and getting involved. I mean, when you think about the stakeholders in hip dysplasia care, who are really probably the biggest stakeholders in the care, it's the families and the patients
Yeah,
who ultimately get care or don't get care. And I think, even so much power just in, I love that your surgeon actually recommended that you go to a Facebook support group, because I think there's a lot, I know for the adults and adolescent patients as well as children and families, there's a lot, first of all, to be said for the idea of community and not being alone in it. And also, there's so much expertise that families bring to the table, patients and families bring to the table, that really the only way you can become experts in it is to live through it. So I think that's wonderful that your surgeon did recommend that, and look where it's taken you. I mean, it went from being able to receive support to being able to probably give support to others, and now this bigger project of connecting with people and really coming together to try to make a difference in this. So I mean, kudos to you all, and it's just an amazing group and amazing work, and we'll be very excited, as it continues to unfold, to share more about it through Miles for Hips, and partner with you all with your efforts, because they're wonderful. What would you say has been some of your biggest challenges related to hip dysplasia, either you or Mia or your family?
I mean, I think definitely the diagnosis was the biggest thing that
Mhm.
was hard for us to navigate, just because we had been wondering for so many months about like what was going on. And then once we got the diagnosis, it was kind of like, you need to have surgery and you should probably do it as soon as possible, and your whole life's going to be turned upside down. And, that was definitely really hard to digest the news and the information, and then kind of like start looking into what happened, dealing with all the feelings coming with that. And then leading up to the surgery itself was also just super nerve wracking, because when you, especially when you have a toddler, you can't really prepare them for what's going to happen. And you're very concerned about, how are they going to react being in a cast and not being able to move. So the whole anticipation was definitely difficult, leading up to the surgery. Um, Also, just like finding a surgeon, because we went through Mass General, at first because our pediatrician was associated with them. But and the surgeon was lovely, but she wasn't a hip expert. And then talking to other pediatricians that I knew through some of my students' parents, actually, at the school I work at, they suggested to check out Boston Children's because they had a hip clinic there. And that's where we met Dr. Novias. And, he does so many hip surgeries and he was such an expert at hips. We knew that we decided to go with him, and he was not our original recommendation. So it was hard kind of like getting to learn everything about DDH because we knew nothing about it, and then getting to know what the surgery and the surgeons and kind of all the logistics of it. And then having to actually deal with the surgery and the aftermath. But kids are resilient, and I think we were so nervous, probably more nervous than Mia was about what was going on. And it was the beginning's definitely rough, adjusting to having a toddler stationary in a cast and not being able to do her normal activities, but she adjusted and we did lots of great things with her while she was casted. And now she post surgery, she's doing amazing. So
Oh, I love hearing that. And I can't even imagine, you and I got a chance to talk offline a little bit about this during our last meeting, but the way, first of all, coming from my experiences as an adult, I had a lot of control over deciding when to do surgery. And a lot of times I've had to plan surgery around my life and figure out, least worst time to do it. But with a little one, I mean, probably it was something they were saying also for her function that we need to do something sooner than later. I mean, just the disruption that creates in your life. I mean, you and your husband are both work, and all of a sudden having to navigate appointments, and like you said, after surgery, I mean, trying to care for a little one in a spica cast. I mean, not easy.
yeah. Yeah, I'm a teacher, and school started in September, and she had her surgery in September. It
Mm,
was like the soonest appointment we could get, and I had to take 4 months off of work to take care of
wow.
her. So it definitely, you know, upended our lives a little bit, and not her so much. She was in daycare, um, but I see with lots of families on the Facebook pages, like, do you send your kids back to daycare? And what do you do? We originally planned to send her back, and then they were having difficulty with her safety there. So I ended up just staying out the entire time with the cast because it wasn't the best environment for her to be in safety wise. So even though they really wanted to help us out. So yeah, it was definitely uh, life altering, but
Yeah.
we got through it. And
Sounds like you're coming out ahead on things in
yes,
spite of a
yeah.
tough couple years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you wish others knew about hip dysplasia?
Yeah, like kind of like what I mentioned earlier, that just like you don't have to have any family history or any risk factors to have DDH. Just I think for families to just have it on their radar, any new parent, just to be aware of what the signs are, risk factors, and if something seems off, then look into it. And if you're not getting answers, then look into it with someone else. But definitely just having it on a radar. I try to tell everyone I know, every new parent or parent to be, um, I try to tell them about it, not to scare them, but just so they're more informed because we weren't informed.
Yeah, and I mean, and it doesn't, I mean, obviously it can be a very scary and overwhelming diagnosis, but, probably thinking about your journey, you go, if we could have gotten that answer earlier, still would have been scary, still would have been
Right.
overwhelming,
She
still
still
would
would
have
have
been
needed.
disruptive, but the journey and the kind of the fight you had to put up to get to there is a lot too. And to be constantly told, no, 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 it's fine, and not know where to turn. So I think you're doing a wonderful thing by raising the awareness and educating, because if it can help somebody get an earlier diagnosis, that would be wonderful. Um, kind of on that note, what are I can probably guess some of your answers, but what do you hope will improve with hip dysplasia diagnosis or care in the future?
Yeah, so definitely improvement for awareness for new parents. I think OBGYNs or hospitals can send families home with information, especially since firstborn children are at greater risk or greater common to have it. Um, and also, besides the diagnosis, I feel like there's not really a centralized place where families could get support, like besides the Facebook group, and even like equipment, like there's spica tables, which a lot of people don't know what they are, but um, it's a table that you can sit at with a spica cast, and so the baby could sit upright. Because usually they're at an angle and they can't sit in regular seats, and that's one of the biggest challenges of the spica cast is being able to sit up and play and eat and have a normal kind of childhood. And people make these things out of wood and pass them along from family to family on the Facebook groups. But why aren't there any companies? There is one company, Ivy Rose Spica Tables, that sells them, but they're the only ones out there. But why aren't there medical companies trying to help kids with spica casts, or a place where you could rent equipment? We had to get special car seats, special booster seats to sit at a table to eat, strollers. And a lot of people just, we were lucky enough that all of our stuff was passed on from other families in the Boston area. And then we passed them along to another family. But there's no really resources besides this network of families in the area that provide this support to how to live life at home with a child in a cast. So I wish there was something more like national or even local by state that you can donate your equipment to when you're done, and then somebody else could rent it out or borrow it for some time. Because there's really nothing, and we wouldn't have made it without the support of the other families.
And for especially with hip dysplasia, I mean, the hope is that you need it for a certain amount of time and then don't
Right,
need it anymore. So
exactly.
it would be a big investment to have to buy it as
Right.
many families do. But yeah, wouldn't it be nice if there was a network? That would be wonderful to have, and especially if there was a way to ship it, free or low cost or things like that. There actually are some for children with special needs with some mobility equipment and things
Mhm.
like that. I wonder, it'd be interesting to look into those to see if there's anything that would take on hip dysplasia equipment as well. I don't know about that, but yeah, that would be a beautiful vision because I can only imagine what the costs can add up to in some
Yeah.
situations. And then the cost of not having it, which is even just like you said, not letting your child have a typical or as much of a typical
Yeah.
period of time. I mean, 4 months is a lot of time in a little one's life,
Right.
right? And developing social skills and language skills and eating skills and independent, self
Mhm.
care and fine motor skills and all of that, and being able to at least facilitate as much of that as possible. Yeah. Well, you all have certainly been through this, and like we said, you're out kind of hopefully on the other side for good. And it sounds like Mia's doing amazing, and you are doing amazing work by getting involved in advocacy. But with all that you've been through and all of your expertise and experience, what advice do you have for either individuals with hip dysplasia or other parents or families who are navigating hip dysplasia with their child?
Definitely, and it sounds very cliche, and like everybody told me this when Mia was going through it. But kids really are resilient, and we take a lot of the stress on, but they figure it out. And I think it was really helpful to try to live as normal life as possible as we could with Spica life. And we took Mia on outings. It was around Halloween, so we were out trick or treating. We went to the farm. We went apple picking. She had her little stroller, and we were just going everywhere with it. So um, it's not the end of the world that we get the diagnosis. We were able to still enjoy holidays and have fun times with her, even though she was through a traumatic surgery and a big ordeal being in the cast. Um, Definitely like be patient with your child, and that every child has a different story. Um, Even post surgery, Mia's been in physical therapy for like a year and a half now since her first surgery, and she still needs it. But it's making her more confident and really helping her build her skills. And um, it's been really helpful. But kids bounce back at different rates, and it might take longer than you think in the beginning. Yeah, and just don't blame yourself for missing things. You could be upset and be sad, but then, especially when there's a lot of lack of education out there, you really can't blame yourself for missing or misdiagnosing what happened. So, yeah, that's the biggest advice I have. Definitely reach out to your network, whether it's medical or family or friends. People want to help, and we had so many people supporting us in so many different ways, whether it was like sending Mia toys in the mail or giving us meals so we didn't have to worry about food when she was in the spica cast. It was really just helpful to have a nice support system through it all.
It sounds like you certainly had an amazing community, and once you found the right team for Mia, and then leaning on other patients and families, both near and far, it sounds like, and then, yeah, taking advantage of your own local support. It's so important whether you're a infant, a child, a family, or an adolescent or adult. Just that community and the support system is so critical for a successful outcome. And we are just so thrilled. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And just so glad to hear that Mia's doing well, and very excited to see all that you and your team will do in the future. This is wonderful.
Yes, we're so excited for all the projects we have in the works, and a few more of our members will be coming on to talk about our group.
Yes, we can't wait, and we can't wait to share more and learn more. So you all are doing amazing work, and it's just been so humbling getting to know you and the rest of the team, and it's just an amazing group of just incredibly passionate and knowledgeable people coming together to do big things. So very excited for all that is to come.
Yeah,
But thank you so much for joining. Have a good rest of your day.
thanks, you too.